This lesson will discuss another vital preparedness topic, evacuation preparedness and transportation. This training touches on considerations such as paratransit and public transportation reliance and will be the last lesson in our preparedness series. With that said, let's get started. This lesson will cover the following topics in more detail: planning for an evacuation, evacuation considerations, alternate methods, public transportation considerations, and the importance of self-advocacy. So why is it important to plan your client's evacuation routes and methods ahead of time? Well, depending on the situation, you and your client might have time to plan or you might not. And as we mentioned in another training, planning now will alleviate stress during an actual emergency. Like other preparedness activities, planning now allows you and your client to spend valuable time reacting rather than planning. By the end of this training, you will be able to determine what needs your client must consider when planning to evacuate, determine routes and methods to evacuate, as well as backups for each, identifying alternates to public transportation if routes are impacted, and understand the importance of self advocacy with officials and government agencies. So, at this point in the training, you should have a good idea of why we plan before a disaster. Still, why does your client need to plan for evacuations? Part of your client's emergency plan is knowing where they will evacuate to, how they will get there, and under what conditions they will select where and how to evacuate. If they are evacuating, so is everyone else in the area, and knowing what they will do ahead of time will make the process go smoother. Emergency evacuation shelters are required to be ADA compliant, but there are still many things that may be missing. Your client may require specialized transportation that they need to plan around. So I wanted to expand on the second to the last bullet point. It is important to understand that being ADA compliant only means they have to be able to offer equal access to shelter and basic facilities. That does not mean that the facilities offered at the shelter will be ideal or well suited for those with specific needs. For example, they might have changing tables for babies, not adults. They might have standard showers, but not wheelchair accessible showers. What about lifts? While there are many individuals trained to assist those with disabilities, they might not be there upon the immediate opening of a shelter. They might need to activate a team to respond. As you can see, ADA accessible doesn't mean all-inclusive facilities. This is why it is important to plan ahead of time. When planning for evacuation, identify nearby evacuation centers by contacting local officials. If your client has pets or a service animal, find out which shelters are pet friendly. Again, service animals are different and are required to be allowed in. So one way to start planning with your client is to contact the local officials. Their contact information can be found on the TCRC website under Emergency Resources and by locating the county-specific listing. You can also start by calling your local city hall to obtain information on a list of evacuation shelters. If they don't have them, they should be able to refer you to who has that information. Consider family and friends that live outside your client's area. When selecting a site for evacuation, remember that staying with family or friends is often the best idea because it's more comfortable and private. Consider specific medical conditions. Does your client have medical conditions that require regular or critical care, such as dialysis? Determine the route they will take and alternate ones if they are blocked or too congested. What route will your client get to the shelter or family or friend's house if they aren't there? What if the route is blocked or there is too much traffic? How will they get there? Have at least 3 routes or more planned. With that said, evacuation routes should also be planned for locations where they are likely to be, such as at work, school, a day center, or any other frequented location. The time to plan is before receiving an evacuation order and is an integral part of your client's personal or family emergency plan. I keep mentioning the personal emergency plan to stress the importance of such a plan. Since your client is likely served by a regional center, there is a high likelihood they have more specialized needs than the general population. How will your client get out if they are alone? Do they have a car? If they do, stress the importance of always having at least half a tank of gas because gas stations may run out or be closed. Do they rely on transportation services? Call local transit providers and emergency management officials to help you and your client identify accessible transport options for them. Are local transit providers contracted to reserve their services for emergencies under agreements with government entities? If so, identify alternatives. What if they rely on public transportation and the routes are not running? Don't worry, we will cover that in another slide. In one of our previous trainings, we talked about adaptive and assistive technology and some of its uses. Building these items specifically in your client's evacuation plan is also important. How will you ensure they have these with them or near them if they have to evacuate so they can communicate with others if they rely on speech assistive technology? What about if it is lost or damaged? Do they have a way to get a replacement or a low-tech alternative? Sometimes, individuals can register with local government agencies if they require assistance evacuating. In San Luis Obispo County, residents can sign up for this type of service. If your client doesn't live in San Luis Obispo County, don't worry, other areas should have someone you can speak to discuss these needs. Start with county officials and then local ones if referred to them. Also, think of 5 people they could call in the event of an evacuation that could help them and add them to their plan if they are not already listed. Regular routes will likely be shut down during a widespread disaster, and officials may use those resources for evacuations. You and your client need to plan around this. By now, you may have noticed a theme in evacuation planning. Much of the information you and your client need can be found online from official sources via phone or in person. If your client relies on the bus, ask their bus driver, what do we do in the event of a disaster and the buses aren't running? Once you and your client learn the backup plan from official sources, incorporate into your client's plan so they don't have to try to remember what they were told during disaster. Instead, they can react by activating their emergency plan. I will mention it again here. It is a good idea to have backups, such as family and friends who may help take your client out of harm's way. If they reach out to you to see what resources you have and you can't help, what is your plan? If they have run out of options, tell them to call their service coordinator and we can find a way to get them out using our resources and contacts. This video provides a great recap of what we have discussed in our series up to this point. I have had the pleasure of hearing Vance Taylor speak live on a few occasions now. Vance is very educated on this topic and, as you can tell, is very inspiring. I look forward to seeing what else he can accomplish in this role.
Hi, I'm Vance Taylor. I'm the Chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at CalOES. I want to share a few key life safety tips as we work to get through these wildfires together. People with disabilities, older adults, and really anyone with an access or functional need may take longer and require more resources to evacuate safely. So be prepared. Your life may depend on it. Number one, have an evacuation plan. Think of 5 people you could call for help and have them be aware of what your needs are going to be. Think of accessible transportation providers and services and vendors that you can use to get out safely. Number 2, put together a go bag. You need medicine, so pack medicine. If you need a wheelchair charger, pack your wheelchair charger. Anything like durable medical equipment, make an entire list of whatever you're going to need to take with you to be safe, secure, healthy, and independent. If you have a list, you won't forget the important stuff. Number 3, sign up to receive important information. Sign up for local emergency alerts, things like Code Red. Sign up for the latest information on resources for California's wildfires by visiting news.caloes.ca.gov. Remember, you have the power to plan for your life safety. Be safe, be well, and be empowered.
Under California state law, there are specific requirements for inclusive planning. California Assembly Bill 2311, enacted in 2016, required jurisdictions, upon the next update of their Emergency Operations Plan, or EOP, to integrate access and functional needs related considerations into specific sections, including the Evacuation and Transportation section. Assembly Bill 477, enacted in 2019, required each county to ensure that they are planning with the community instead of for the community by requiring jurisdictions to include representatives from access and functional needs populations within the next regular update to their EOP. This means ensuring that individuals with access and functional needs are involved in each phase of the plan development process. This is why you must encourage your client to work with emergency management, government agencies and officials, volunteer for AFN advisory committees or other similar groups, and speak at official meetings so that their voice is heard. If you and your client have identified barriers or gaps in developing their evacuation plan, contact local officials or advocacy groups to voice their concerns. As the Lanternman Act guarantees, everyone has the right to equal treatment under the law, especially regarding disasters and especially those we serve. When reaching out, find out if there are panels or committees you can join or attend meetings to ensure that their voice is heard. You can also speak at official meetings where public comments are accepted. If you do, prepare your remarks beforehand, as there are typically time limits to how long you can speak. I will close with this remark. There is a massive push in California and across the country for inclusive emergency planning, specifically regarding those in the AFN community, which is access and functional needs. Now is a great time to make sure you are heard. I am currently part of 3 Ventura County committees working on evacuation and emergency planning for those in the AFN community. You can also contact the TCRC ERC if you receive services here, and I can advocate for you or facilitate meetings with officials, as I am involved in many local meetings in all 3 counties we serve. First off, I want to apologize because this video is a little bit old. However, the information is still relevant and good to know. Just so you are aware, this video is geared towards first responders and how to respond to or assist someone the regional center serves during an evacuation. This video also highlights the topic we just discussed, self-advocacy.
Some incidents and disasters pose a direct threat to the public. And in response, emergency officials may order an evacuation. When that happens, first responders play a vital role in assisting people with access and functional needs.
You're going to find people with access and functional needs in your hood and my hood. We are everywhere. We're part of the community, and we are totally integrated.
My name is David, and this is my service dog Hawk, and I'm a wheelchair user.
My name is Luke, and I use a communication device.
Hi, my name is Paul, and I use a cane.
It's really people who have mobility impairments who depend on public transportation to get around, depend on paratransit to get around, and those who may not have cars may have some level of need for assistance, but they're not necessarily going to need it to be entirely accessible. They may have durable medical equipment like a wheelchair, like a shower chair, a Hoyer lift that they're going to need to be able to maintain themselves in the general population shelter. And for first responders, it's really critical that you work with those individuals to take their equipment. A functional need most of the time is not a medical need whatsoever. It's about a person's ability to be, for mobility, to be able to communicate. The majority of people with disabilities live independently in the community, and that's so critical for everyone to remember in disaster that shouldn't change.
You may need to assist people who don't speak English, older people, children, people with thinking, remembering, or understanding limitations, people with mental illness, people with specific dietary needs, and pregnant women.
Our society is diverse. In some cases, communication could be a challenge, but there are some simple things you can do.
Well, the object isn't to have a lengthy conversation or a complicated conversation. You can use pictograms or drawings, but the bottom line is that you can communicate the need to quickly and safely evacuate.
Well, it's important to realize that some people have hidden limitations. Somebody with autism may act like they understand what you're telling them, but they may only be repeating what you've just told them. and it's important to know the difference.
Well, you got to try to do your best to quickly recognize that there's a disability here, having a hard time communicating with them. And then once you realize that, be patient, give them some time. That way you can effectively communicate and get the message along and move along quickly to the next.
First responders should ask. We know our disabilities and what limitations we have and how to best address them, and in the quickest, most efficient way. Talk to your local independent center and include them in your training and your drills, and practice for these needs before you're actually in the emergency.
To learn more about working with people with access and functional needs, personal preparedness, or evacuation planning, go to www.calema.ca.gov.
Like I said, that video is a bit old. That website at the end, CalEMA, no longer exists. It's going to be CalOES.ca.gov, as CalOES replaced CalEMA. The links to the resources on this slide can be found on the TCRC website and the Rescue Tri-County section, as well in the video description below. The first resource is from Ready.Gov and gives you considerations for evacuation planning. The second resource is a guide by CalOES for jurisdictions based on the two bills we were talking about in the slide before the video. The next is a resource that you can use for self-advocacy. It's an ADA checklist for emergency shelters. So if your client ever finds themselves in a shelter, they can use this to make sure that their needs are being met, and if not, they can bring it up to shelter staff. And then the last one is what I mentioned about the SLO County evacuation assistance. If your individual lives in SLO County and needs help with evacuation, this is where they would sign up. Again, this would be the time where you could ask questions if I was presenting this in person. However, since this is a recording, please send any questions you have to the TCRC ERC. My contact information can be found above. Today we covered the importance of planning for evacuations, some basic considerations when planning how your client will evacuate, tips for navigating public transportation service interruption during disasters, and the importance of encouraging your client to advocate for themselves in emergency planning to public officials. Thank you so much for your time and your commitment to safety and disaster preparedness. As always, I welcome any and all feedback on this training. And these are some of the references you can find of where the information came from contained within this presentation. They can be found on the TCRC website in the Rescue Tri-County section or in the video description below if you'd like to visit these pages.